Mr. James, would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Sure. The name's James. Jordan James.
Mr. James, what do you do for a living?
I'm a musician. I play a very unique fusion of folk and country. Of course, I haven't exactly made my big break yet, so until I do, I bartend at Chuggy's, make ends meet.
And why are you here today?
I was the bartender that was working on the night that awful accident happened.
Mr. James, how well would you say that you know Mr. Dawson?
Mr. Dawson and I have been friends for, going on about a year and a half now. I'm always talking to him in the bar. We've even been on the same softball team together before.
So, you say you see Mr. Dawson at the bar a lot. What is he like?
He's one of my favorite people to have around. He always takes care of me when it comes to tip time, if you know what I mean. He's really nice. He's very friendly, very sociable, very fun to be around. There's one thing that makes him stand out from everybody else, though.
What's this one thing that you're talking about?
Danny, he's really careful about not driving when he's had too many drinks.
Well, let's talk about what you see him do regularly. When he comes into the bar, how much alcohol does he typically buy?
Oh, he's always buying a drink for a girl or buying a drink for his buddy. In a typical night, he'll probably make me get shots for everyone in the bar 2 or 3 times. He'll end up with $100, $150 bar tab and actually have only had maybe 3 or 4 drinks in the whole night.
Also, how does he act at the bar normally?
Well, normally he's dancing around, being really fun, being silly. That's just his personality. He likes to have a good time. And so, no matter what, he's always, being friendly with people, hanging out, talking a lot, being sociable.
How clumsy is Mr. Dawson?
He's one of the clumsiest people I've ever met in my life. When we were on the softball team together, he could barely run from first to second without stumbling around.
Are there any specific instances in which he's shown this?
Yes. So we had this running joke on the team that if he ever took one of those field sobriety tests that you're always seeing on cops and stuff, he would totally bomb it even if he were stone cold sober. That's how clumsy he is.
Why would you make this assumption? Is there any series of events that might have led you to make it?
Yeah, so we had this cop on our softball team.
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled at this point.
Are there any events that led you to believe this?
Yeah, we had this cop on our softball team, or we used to. This was last summer, about a year ago or so. We had this cop on our softball team, and since that was a joke that we all had, this one time the cop actually gave Danny a field sobriety test.
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
Once again, could you talk about how he was doing on this field sobriety test?
I mean, I can't tell you exactly, but it looked like he was doing really badly.
Objection, cause for speculation.
Overruled.
Can you continue telling us how he was doing on this field sobriety test?
It looked like he was doing really badly. He stumbled around when they asked him to do the balance test. He couldn't say his ABCs backward to save his life. I was embarrassed for him, and I wasn't even the one taking it.
Well, now that we know what Mr. Dawson's like, let's talk about the night of the accident. When did Mr. Dawson come in?
He came in right after his job interview that day. His aunt had drove him to the bar because he didn't have his car back in town, so he didn't have anywhere else to go, and he came into the bar at about 2 o'clock that afternoon.
How much was he drinking that night?
He was there for a while, but I served him way fewer drinks than I normally do. He was taking it really slow that night.
How was he acting?
Just like good old Danny. He got up onto the stage and helped the band out, keep everyone entertained, and played their guitar. He was talking to everyone, being really friendly, being funny, just like good old Danny.
And before he left your bar, when he was about to get in his car and drive home, what was his demeanor? Was he sober? Was he intoxicated?
Objection, cause for speculation.
Overruled.
Oh, no, no way. I deal with drunk people all the time, way more than I'd like to. And I know when I see a drunk person, and the time Danny left, he was not one of them.
How could you tell?
I mean, he was talking totally normal. He wasn't slurring. I mean, he was walking straight. I settled his tab. He said good evening, and he walked out with his friends.
Pass the witness.
Mr. James, is it true that you say the better the service, the better you tip?
That's true. It's very important to be very friendly with your customers.
And it's true that Chuggy's doesn't make you measure your pores?
No, they trust me to keep everybody on track.
And you define a regular as someone who gives you large tips?
Objection, Your Honor. This is an irrelevant line of questioning.
Overruled.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
If you could, please.
And you define a regular as someone who leaves you good tips?
I define a regular as somebody that's always coming into the bar. And I would also agree that my regulars normally tip me more than everybody else.
And you also say that a regular is someone who you make strong drinks for, is that correct?
Oh, that's right. I like to keep all my customers happy.
Do you know the defendant?
Yes, I do. We've known each other for a year and a half now.
And do you consider him a regular customer of yours?
Yes, I do.
And that night, he actually left you a great tip, even for him, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And you were surprised the tip that he left you, is that correct?
I would say I was happy with the tip he left me.
But you were still shocked at the large amount of tip that he left you that night, is that correct?
No, I wasn't shocked. Danny always takes good care of me.
So is it safe to assume that night that since he did leave you a large tip, you made his drinks extra strong that night?
No.
Okay. So complimentary drinks at Chuggy's are not on the regular bar tab, is that correct?
Well, that's right. We don't ring them up.
And it's safe to assume that this is the policy every night, including the night in question?
I mean, there's not really a policy for giving customers complimentary drinks. We're technically not supposed to do it, but I mean, you know how it is. When you have a good customer, sometimes you hook them up with a drink or two on the house.
So is that a yes to my question?
Well, I think if I understand the question, then it was a no. That there isn't really a policy at Chuggy's about giving free drinks to anybody.
And did the defendant receive complimentary drinks that night?
I gave him one.
And is it true that the defendant thanked you later on that evening for making his drinks long and strong?
Yeah, that's right. That's Danny.
And you were actually extremely busy that evening, is that correct?
Oh yeah, we had this band playing that apparently everyone was in love with.
I'm sorry if you could answer with just a yes or no. Is it true that you were busy that night?
Yeah, we were packed to the brim.
So busy that you couldn't keep tab on the defendant all night, is that correct?
Oh no, I couldn't.
And so you didn't keep tab. Moving to the softball team. You were talking about the DUI earlier, is that correct? The supposed DUI test that he was administered.
Yes.
And you said that you were not definitive on whether he passed or failed, is that correct?
Well, no, I mean, I'm not a cop.
So there's a possibility that he did not fail that DUI.
Well, I don't really know. It looked like he was doing horrendous, though.
If you could just shorten your answers to yes or no. So there is a possibility that he could have passed that DUI test, is that correct?
I guess the answer is I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to evaluate those things.
But earlier you said that it looked like he had failed, is that correct?
I said it looked like he was doing awful.
But there's a possibility that that was not true, is that correct?
Well, no, I mean, it did look like he was doing really awful.
And let's mention some darts that the defendant was playing with that night.
Oh, I didn't let him play with darts.
But is it true that the defendant told you, are you sure the dartboard is not moving?
Yeah, I think he was joking around about that at one point.
But the defendant did say, are you sure that the dartboard is not moving? I guess I must be off tonight.
Yeah, that's right.
Your Honor, no further questions. We ask that Mr. James be allowed to step down.
You may sit down.
Your Honor, the defense calls Ms. Bennett to the stand. you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is London Bennett.
Miss Bennett, can you tell the jury a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm not originally from Midlands, but I got here as quick as I could. My family's from here. My uncle, he got shot a couple years ago, but he left me a good sum of money so I get to live on something pretty nice. It's just me and my dog at my house. It's a nice life.
Where is your house?
It's on Canyon Road.
The same part of Canyon Road where an accident occurred on September 24th?
Yes, ma'am. I saw that accident. It was real sad.
What were you doing when you saw the accident?
I was sitting on my porch with my dog, and I was painting.
Well, what were you painting?
Well, the sky. It was raining real hard, and I wanted to paint a thunderstorm. I'd never done that before, so I was on my porch painting.
What made you look up at the road if you had been painting the sky?
Oh, my dog was barking, and she was going nuts, actually. It was, poor thing, she thinks she's a bloodhound. She's really a basset hound. She started to bark, and I looked up the road, and that's when I saw the car.
Does your dog usually bark at cars?
She barks at pretty much anything that's moving, but being an animal, she barks at any other animal she sees. She doesn't like anything, deers, rabbits, birds, anything she does not like on our property.
Well, Miss Bennett, do you see a lot of deer, rabbits, or birds where you live?
Yes, ma'am, I do. It's a lot of trees, kind of forest. So there's a lot of animals.
Did you see a deer the night of the accident?
No, ma'am, I didn't see a deer. I heard Peaches bark. It's my dog. And I looked up when she was barking, expecting to see a deer. I reached for a shotgun, but that's when I saw that car.
All right, so your dog started barking at the road.
Yes, ma'am.
You went, you're going to get your shotgun because you thought there was a deer,
Yes, ma'am.
but you ended up seeing a car.
Yes, ma'am.
What happened when that car came down the road?
Well, I saw it, and then I saw it swerve, and it tried to stay on the road, and it was following the curb, and I thought it was going to be okay. And then it got back on the road, and I thought, thank heaven, it's going to be fine. And it started to spin, and then it hit a pole and a tree.
Miss Bennett, what did you do when you saw the car hit a pole and a tree?
Oh, well, I called 911. I told them that there had been an accident, and then I went down to see if I could help. I mean, I'm not a doctor or anything, but I thought maybe I could help.
Well, when you got down to the accident scene, did you see Mr. Dawson?
I did, yes, ma'am.
Can you tell the jury how Mr. Dawson was acting?
Oh, poor thing, he seemed real shaken up. I was just glad to see somebody alive after that accident, but he seemed shaken up. But other than that, he didn't seem to be hurt.
Well, Miss Bennett, did Mr. Dawson seem like he was drunk?
Oh, no, ma'am. He wasn't slurring. He wasn't stumbling. I've seen plenty of drunk people. That uncle I had, he drank like a fish. But Mr. Dawson did not seem drunk, no, ma'am.
No further questions.
Good evening, Miss Bennett.
Hi.
You were sitting on your porch painting the night in question, is that
Yes,
correct?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And you observed the vehicle prior to the accident, is that correct?
Yes, I saw it right before it went off the road.
Did it appear that the vehicle was speeding at that point?
It looked like it was going a little fast, yes, ma'am.
So it did appear the vehicle was speeding, yes?
I believe so, yes.
And you're familiar with Canyon Road?
Yes, ma'am, I've lived there almost my whole life.
And the speed limit on Canyon Road is 35 miles per hour, is that correct?
At certain parts, yeah. Other times it's 45.
And at this particular part in the road where your home is and where you saw the accident, that's 35 miles per hour?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're the one who called 911 because you witnessed the accident?
I did, yes, ma'am. I called 911.
So, you were the first person on the scene of the accident, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Because I was so close, I beat the police there.
Now, moving to the accident, isn't it true that when you got there that the defendant told you that when you ask about anyone else being there, the defendant says, she's okay?
Yeah, I think he said that.
And after that, the defendant started rambling on about Jack and Ginger?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you familiar with a Jack or Ginger?
A Jack Ginger what?
Are you familiar with Jack or Ginger? Do you know what that means, what the defendant was talking about?
No, ma'am.
Are you familiar with an alcoholic drink of Jack Daniel's whiskey? and
Objection,
ginger
Your
ale?
Honor, more prejudicial than probative. We don't know what Mr. Dawson was referring to. We can't ask him himself. May we assume we're outside the earshot of the jury?
Yes.
Putting these two questions side by side, this witness has no ability to tell what Mr. Dawson was talking about when he said Jack and Ginger. Asking her whether or not Jack and Ginger is an alcoholic drink is going to confuse the jury and make them think the two are related, when really we have no way of knowing because only Mr. Dawson knows what he meant by Jack and Ginger.
Your Honor, the question was, are you familiar with an alcoholic drink?
Your Honor, my objection is to more prejudicial than probative.
Sustained.
After the defendant was rambling on about Jack and Ginger, was it shortly thereafter that you started hearing the defendant ramble even further and mutter over and over again, "So stupid. Why did I let them talk me into driving when I knew I was tipsy?"
I don't remember when he said that. I don't remember how soon it was after he was talking about the Jack and Ginger.
Okay, the question is, did the defendant ramble on about, "So stupid, why did I let them talk me into driving when I was tipsy"?
Yes, ma'am. So I didn't understand your question. Yes, he did say that.
And isn't it true that, you went over to the car at that point and you found Vanessa there at that?
Yes, I got to the car and I saw a Miss Hobson and she was bleeding a little bit, and then I saw a Miss Sullivan.
And Vanessa, she wasn't fine, was she?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I just know that I couldn't get her to wake up.
Okay, so at this point, you felt that she wasn't fine because you couldn't get her to wake up?
Yeah, I didn't know what was going on. I'm not a doctor.
And you yelled for the defendant to come over and help you because she wouldn't wake up. Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
thought maybe if I could get her out of the car, I could do CPR. I'm CPR certified, but I couldn't get her out of the car. She's too heavy for me.
And the defendant responded to you by saying, "No, Vanessa's fine. She has to be fine when my life is over." Is
Yeah,
that correct?
he said that. He seemed like he was real worried.
Did the defendant mention anything about seeing a deer or anything in the road?
I don't remember at that point. The police got there, and Officer Foster took care of everything.
So the defendant didn't mention anything about a deer or wildlife in the road?
I don't think so. He didn't say anything to me. He didn't talk to me a whole lot.
And you personally did not see any animals, deer, wildlife, or anything that night? on the
No,
road?
ma'am, I didn't see any. No, but maybe Peaches did.
Okay. And last question, Miss Bennett. It was raining that night, wasn't it?
Oh yes, ma'am. It was.
Thank you.
Brief redirect, Your Honor. Miss Bennett, you mentioned on cross that you think maybe Peaches saw a deer.
I think so. She barks at animals a whole lot, so that's why I thought she was barking.
And when you had a chance to talk to Mr. Dawson, how did he seem?
He seemed fine. He seemed scared. That crash would have shaken me up for weeks, but he seemed all right. Yeah, he seemed all right.
No further questions.
Redirect, Journey. Miss Bennett, you cannot conclusively state that there was not a deer or some other wildlife or animals or anything in the road that night, even though Peaches barked, right?
Oh no, ma'am. I didn't see anything.
So you cannot conclusively state that there was no wildlife there at that point in time, right?
No, I can't say there wasn't. No, there might have been.
Thank you.
The defense calls Miss Leslie Roman to the stand. Good morning. Good evening. Would you introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, my name is Leslie Roman.
Miss Roman, what do you do?
I'm an accident reconstructionist for the state of Midlands.
What is an accident reconstructionist?
I would work backwards to figure out what happened during an accident.
Now, how are you qualified to be an accident reconstructionist?
I have a Bachelor of Science from the University of Texas. I used to work for the Midlands Center of Transportation, and currently I own my own firm.
Now, Miss Roman, what's your role in this case?
I was hired by the defense to look into what happened that night and to look over what happened in the fatal crash scene report.
What sorts of information do you gather to make conclusions like this?
I would read over the witnesses' testimonies. I would go to the scene of the accident. I would look at the damage done to the car, and overall make conclusions from all the photographs gathered.
After you gather all this information, what do you do with it?
I would plug all this data and facts into equations, scientific equations based upon mechanics and physics.
Where are these equations found?
These are all found in the Windsor and Strasbourg article.
And is this Windsor and Strasbourg article relied upon in your field?
Yes, it is.
In this case, did you reliably put all the information you gathered into all of the equations found in that article?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Roman, you said that you looked over the fatal crash team report of Officer Foster, is that right?
Yes.
What did you find with it?
I found that there were two places where I believe Officer Foster made some mistakes.
What were these mistakes?
The first mistake was the way he calculated drag factor, and the second mistake was the kind of equation he used to figure out what speed the car was going.
Okay, let's take these one by one. You said something about a drag factor. What is a drag factor?
Drag factor is basically the friction force of the road. For example, if there's a lot of water on the road, there's less friction. If it was sunny and the road is dry, there's more friction.
What is this mistake that Officer Foster made?
What Officer Foster did was use an old tire, fill it up with concrete, and drag it along the ground. The problem is that this method is not conclusive and is extremely sensitive to operator error.
And did you use this method?
I did not.
Now, there was a second mistake that you said he made. What was it?
It was the kind of equation he used to find specifically the speed of the vehicle. There are two. One of them is a wide object formula in which the car hits a wide object, and the other one is a narrow object formula in which the car hits a narrow object, a tree or a pole. Officer Foster used the wide object formula when the car first hit a utility pole.
And did you use the correct formula?
Yes, I did.
How fast was Danny Dawson actually driving on this road?
51 miles per hour.
Now, Officer Foster, you also made a diagram of the accident.
Yes.
Now, I'd like to ask you, what happened in this crash?
What happened, as I understand it, it was dark that day. It was pouring rain very heavily. Danny Dawson was driving on a road, Canyon Road, when he reached the curb. And that's when a suddenly appearing obstacle, I believe it was a deer, jumped in front of the road. And he swerved
Objection,
to the
Your
road.
Honor. It's called for speculation.
Your Honor, under Rule 703, an expert is allowed to make her conclusions based on the data she gathered.
Would you respond, Your Honor? She can't conclusively state whether or not a deer was there or not at the night in question.
You get a chance to cross-examine her, but I'll allow the testimony.
Ms. Roman, what happened then?
Well, it was dark, it was raining. When Danny Dawson was driving on the road, a suddenly appearing obstacle, like a deer, appeared on the road. He swerved to avoid it. He went off the road. He went back on. He lost control of the car because it was so wet, the car hydroplaned. And then he hit a utility pole and then a tree.
Now let's break this down step by step. You said that there was a deer in the road. How do you know that there was a deer in the road?
I know that there was a deer in the road because of the tire tracks we found on the grass and on the pavement. These tracks are consistent with a person swerving to avoid a suddenly appearing obstacle, such as a deer.
Where would this deer have come from?
It was a very heavily wooded area. A tree could have come from either side of the road.
After Danny Dawson swerved to avoid this deer, how far did he follow the road while half on the grass?
He was half on the grass, half on the road, and he managed to follow the road for 124 feet.
What happened after he managed to get back on the road?
He successfully followed the curve, but when he's back on the road, the ground was watery, slick, and he hydroplaned.
What is hydroplane?
It's when there's a film of water, and what happens is that the car kind of slides on that water, causing the driver to have no control. And then after that, Mr. Dawson hit a utility pole and a tree.
Now, in your report, you speak in depth about the tree. Where was this tree?
This tree was shockingly only 2 feet away from the edge of the pavement. Usually trees are not allowed to grow this close to the pavement because usually trees are cut down to provide what we call a clear zone so that drivers have a margin of error in case they run off the shoulder.
Is there anything else to protect drivers from these trees besides just cutting them down?
Yes, usually the city would have a guardrail, but in this case the guardrail didn't extend far enough to protect this accident.
Now, Ms. Roman, hypothetically, if the tree were to have not been there or if the guardrail were to have extended past it,
Objection, Your Honor. He's asking her to testify to things that might have happened weren't the case. It's remedial measures.
Ms. Roman, hypothetically, if this tree were to have not been there, or if the guardrail were to have extended past the tree, what might have happened in this case?
I can't say for sure, but I have to believe that this accident wouldn't have been so bad and that Vanessa Sullivan would be alive today.
Pass the witness.
Ms. Roman, hello. My name is Kimberly Smith. I'm just going to ask you a few questions today. You weren't contacted to review this accident until 3 weeks after. Is that correct?
That's true.
And so you were unable to review the vehicle itself except at the impound lot.
Yes.
And you weren't able to actually review the rutting or the pavement itself at the time of the accident. Is that correct?
Not at the time. I went over later.
Okay. 3 weeks later.
Yes.
Okay. And when you did get a chance to examine the accident scene, there were no tire tracks, no screech, no brake marks, nothing like that on the road. Is that correct?
I was able to figure out that it was consistent with the deer on the road.
My question is, were there any screech marks? I didn't ask you any. Were there any tire tracks, as in somebody applying brakes, trying to stop, trying to slow down?
No, there weren't.
No, there weren't. Okay, thank you. Isn't it true that you cannot conclusively determine that a deer ran into the road that day?
That's true. I wasn't there. I didn't see the deer.
Okay. But you can conclusively state that the defendant lost control
He lost control of the car because of hydroplane.
when he overcorrected. Is that correct?
Yes.
So he overcorrected and then hydroplaned, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And in your affidavit, you conclude that Danny could have gone off the road, of the right side of the road, for any number of reasons. Is that correct?
There are other possibilities, yes.
Could have been a rabbit.
Could have been a rabbit.
Could have been a pothole.
Could have been.
Could have been he was intoxicated.
I said that he was consistent with a deer in the road, not that he was consistent with drunk
But
driving.
it could have been any number of those other things,
There are
correct?
other possibilities.
Including one of those possibilities might be that he was intoxicated. Is that correct?
That's true.
Thank you. Now, you've concluded that Dawson was traveling 51 miles an hour when the vehicle initially left the road.
Yes.
What is the speed limit on Canyon Road?
35 miles per hour.
Now, as you said, you used the Windsor-Strasburg primer to
Yes.
calculate your results. And we've discussed ad nauseum the variance for the narrow optic formula, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that Windsor-Strasburg primer dictates that when an object collides with something 24 inches or smaller, that you must use the narrow object formula, unless the damage is spread across a wide vehicle, or the area of the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the tree that you measured that Dawson hit, how wide was that tree?
30 inches.
39 inches, I believe, was what's in your report.
I think it was 30 inches in diameter.
At this time, I'd like to approach the witness with a copy of her report.
Go ahead.
For her. Hey.
see that?
Yes, absolutely. It's right in the equation. Is this the report that you created
Yes.
after the accident? And could you please check to see if it's been altered, changed in any way?
No, it has not.
Okay, and was it created on or about the time that you were involved in this?
Yes.
Did you review any photos to determine your conclusions?
Yes, I did.
And the tree was in one of those photos, wasn't it?
Yes.
Let the record reflect, I'm showing the opposing counsel photos from the accident scene.
Which one?
I will be specifically referring to photo
Okay.
14, which was taken by Mrs. Roman. Ms. Roman, if I could please direct your attention to the photo that you took at the accident scene that day. I'd like you to follow along with me as I read the caption below. Tree stuck by the right side of the vehicle was approximately 39 inches in diameter at the base. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, 39 is wider than 24. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, given that the object was in fact a wide object, you should have not used the narrow variance. Is that correct?
The problem is that the car first hit a utility pole, which is less than 2 feet wide.
I understand that, and the Windsor-Strasburg primer allows for you to have a side impact collision and a front impact collision, both of which you would use the variable if it's a narrow object or if it's not spread across the wide body of the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you did not, you chose to use that narrow variable in both of your equations, didn't you?
Yes.
Despite the fact that the tree was not a narrow object.
Yes.
And the damage to the vehicle in the front was across the width of the vehicle, wasn't it?
Yes.
So the variable should not have been used in either equation, should it have?
Because the pole was below 2 feet in diameter, therefore I use an narrow object formula.
But you've already stated that when the damage is spread across the width of the vehicle, you are not to use that formula. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you also stated that the damage to the front of the vehicle was across the width of the vehicle.
Yes.
And that is where the damage was, that is where the impact with the pole was, correct?
Yes.
So you should not have used that formula, is that correct?
Yes.
So then your conclusions are incomplete and inaccurate, is that correct?
No.
But you just stated that the formula that you used was incorrect.
My ultimate conclusion was that Mr. Dawson swerved because of a deer in the road. That hasn't changed.
The speed that you calculated, though, is incorrect, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
A brief redirect. Regardless of the speed of the vehicle, why did Danny Dawson swerve?
Danny Dawson swerved not because of any speed he was traveling at, but because the suddenly appearing obstacle, a deer in this case, jumped in front of the car, and he swerved to avoid that deer.
And further, regardless of tree size, should it have been there?
The tree should not have been there,
And why again?
because it was too close to the edge of the road, and it doesn't give drivers a margin of error to go off the shoulder.
No further question.
Just one question on recross, if I may. I'm going to ask you one more time. Can you conclusively state that a deer was in the road that night?
Objection, asked and answered.
She's, Your Honor, if I may, she's drawn the conclusion repeatedly that a
Why
deer...
don't you answer the question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've overruled.
I
this
apologize,
objection.
Your Honor. Could you
I
please...
was not there at the scene, so I can't conclusively state there was a deer.
Thank you. No further questions.
Your Honor, with this, the defense rests its case in chief. We ask that Ms. Roman be allowed to step down. We ask for a 10-minute recess.
No objections, Your Honor.